In 2003, I was invited to go to Idaho by the Alturas Foundation and live on a ranch at 7,000 feet in the Sawtooth Valley. I had an opportunity to tell this story about a remote valley in central Idaho. The population is only 100, but all those people are acutely aware of the world around them and what goes on in it. The environment and how they approach it, the mining, the ranching, the hunting, and you see that in all the pictures. So it took me a while to learn that. It's like learning another language, but it's the language of a place. I think the Sawtooth Valley is a microcosm of what we see everywhere in the environment. And it may look different, it may be manifested slightly differently, but all of it is still relevant to how we live and the choices that we're willing to make. So when people look at this work, I hope that they come to think about some of those things, even if it's only the most shocking picture, which I think for most people is of the quartered elk. I hope that people that see the work and think about each photograph will consider the conundrums and dilemmas that each of us face living in our world, in this world, all the environmental problems that we have, and what choices each of us makes as we approach our own lives. My approach to landscape is a very 19th century approach in the sense that I use an 8x10 view camera with film. And so for every picture that I take, I get under a dark cloth, there's a ground glass, the image is upside down and backwards, and I frame the landscape in the camera in that way. So my technique is very 19th century, but the things I'm thinking about are often very contemporary. The environment, how we use it, how we think about it. Those are issues that the 19th century wasn't thinking about, or the early 20th century. Although I love that way of working, I understand that the world now is changing and that there are digital cameras where you can make numerous pictures in a second, really, or two. So there are many ways of approaching the same subject and many ways of telling a story. And my story might take place in central Idaho, but someone else's is going to take place in Los Angeles or San Antonio. And the issues that face that person will be different, and the way that they approach it, the tools they use to approach it, will be different. I love teaching, and I love teaching art because you never know what you're going to find. And you find all the students in your classroom, each coming from a particular background with some particular history or some particular interest. And that manifests itself, especially when you work with people over multiple years. You get to see them become themselves in this most magical way. I only have one imagination, but my students by now, I've had hundreds of students, so hundreds of imaginations before me, making their mark in the world. And that is a wonderful, wonderful thing. But I think there are enormous opportunities for people who go to art school, because the world is made of people who are using the arts every single day. Designers, filmmakers, photographers, all are using it in ways that if you just look around you, you see it everywhere. I think an art education teaches students to be problem solvers. I think it teaches them to be resourceful. I think it teaches them to imagine different ways of approaching any number of problems. And those problems can come from critical thinking, they can come from using your hands, they can come from any number of different kinds of media or assignments. And so students then go out into the world with an attitude that makes them much more able to approach any given situation and make it work for themselves and for whoever they're working with. I come from a family full of writers, and also my mother is a photographer. So for me, I knew that I wanted to write. Even when I was a little girl, I wrote poetry, I wrote stories all my life, even in elementary school. So I knew that I would do something like that. What I didn't know at all was that I would become a visual artist. My mother has a photography studio where she takes pictures of families and of weddings and bar mitzvahs, and she still has that. And she taught me to use a camera and to develop film in her dark room, and to develop photographs themselves. And there's something about the magic of that photograph coming up in the chemistry, and you see the image as you rock the liquids back and forth, and it is so amazing and magical. I was hooked almost immediately at age 12. And then I had the great good fortune in college to encounter Emmett Gowan, who is a teacher of photography. He's a photographer. He's a legendary teacher as well, and he was absolutely essential to my deciding to go ahead and become a visual artist. Through him, I understood the way you could live a life. I understood that photography could tell stories. I understood that it had its own poetry and its own narrative drive. So all of those things came to me at that point. The world needs artists. The world needs to hear from every generation. The world needs to hear from each person that feels that they have an important story to tell and a perspective to bring to others. That is the way that art is crucial to our development as a civilization, that we understand through artists the variety of experience and the variety of ideas and thoughts that come from people of all backgrounds and all walks of life. I think artists have an enormous role to play in the world because they tell stories from lots of different perspectives, young people and old people, and every generation brings a new perspective and a new way of seeing and a new way of looking at things. And it's so important that young people learn to be artists so that their stories are told to people younger and older than they are, and so that we can see the world from many different points of view. I think I have 3 jobs. I make art, I'm a teacher, and I'm a mother. So I have all of that going on at once. And it's a lot, but life should be a lot. So you really want to invite as much as you can into your life.